Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying Self-Publishing. Today I am joined by Jennie Nash, and I am thrilled to have her here on today's podcast because she is a wealth of information for those who are starting their writing journey or maybe have pursued publishing previously and are looking to boost their sales or maybe have a little extra support in the next book that they are writing. Jennie, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Jennie Nash, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Author Accelerator. We've been in business for 11 years, and we are on a mission to lead the emerging book coaching industry. We've certified more than 300 book coaches who are working all over the world in all different genres, helping all different kinds of writers to write better books. So I'm all about the power of book coaching to help writers do their best work.
That is a really powerful initiative and something that I'm excited to explore and chat more about, because I know that you started with publishing and started as an author. And so the journey to becoming a book coach is quite a unique one. I would love to chat about what the defining moment might have looked like when you realized that book coaching was the true calling for you.
I love that you see it that way, because that's actually how it felt. I'm the author of 12 books in 3 different genres, and I was on the path to being a writer, having that be my career, and was doing quite well. My first 6 books were published by Big 5 publishers, and I was doing the thing. I was a mid-list writer. I was in it. I was doing it. And I was teaching at the UCLA Writers Program, which is the largest adult education writing program in the country. I taught there for 13 years. And there was a gap between what I could teach and what the writers needed. That was the defining moment. Everybody who's a writer has probably been in a writing workshop, and you've got your pages and you've got your idea, and all you want is for somebody to enter into that with you and to help you brainstorm, and is this right, and is this good, and is the vision in my head coming out on the page, and how am I doing, and is it good enough? That key question. And when you're teaching a workshop and you've got 15 or 20 or 30 writers, however many you have, you just simply cannot give them that attention that they need. You can't enter into their work at the level that they need. And so it's frustrating for the writer, and it's frustrating for the instructor, because I knew I could help people, but I was forced by the structure of the institutional setting to teach in a certain way. And what I began to realize is that all writing education was being forced into that same box. And so I began to dream about what would it look like to give a writer the help that they really needed, the support that they really needed. What would that look like? And while I was having those thoughts and dreams, one of my colleagues came to me and said, "Will you help me write a book from zero?" She had never written a book. She was an agent who was teaching sort of a story structure class for mainly fiction writers. And she had this idea for methodology or framework that could help them. And so I had the opportunity to develop a system to help a writer. She was willing to do anything I said. And I had a reputation for being very marketplace focused, which most writing instructors are craft focused. That's why she had come to me, and she wanted to write a book that would sell. So I developed this system to help her, and it began with a series, a method of inquiry. What do you want to write? Why do you want to write it? What are your goals? Who is the reader? Where is it going to fit in the marketplace? These foundational questions that I never once got to ask in my other classes, because we were so focused on, how do you write a scene, or how do you develop a character, or how do you, that sort of thing. So we worked together for a year developing her idea, her voice, her structure, her book, the whole thing. And that book ended up being Wired for Story by Lisa Cron, which is beloved in the writing community. And she sold it in a 2-book deal to 10 Speed, which is a division of Random House. And it launched her whole career as an incredibly beloved instructor for writers all over the world now, because that book is such a big seller. That was the defining moment of my realizing book coaching is something different from teaching. And I liked it better than my own writing. I thought I was better at it than I was doing the writing my own self. And her success opened the door for me to help a whole bunch of other people. And my methods really were proven to be solid and strong and repeatable. And that's where my whole journey to being a book coach and then launching a book coach training and certification program came from.
What an incredible origin story to have the opportunity and almost a divine intervention that put you in the position to be able to explore and establish what that program would look like moving forward. Were there any learning opportunities through that initial phase? You went into the next book coaching scenario and tweaked or adjusted.
I think I'm still adjusting it all. It's been perhaps 13 years since that experience with Lisa, and I'm still learning and adjusting. And here's the reason why. There's a reality about the creative process that I think we often get wrong. And that reality is that we're not actually as unique as we think we are. That
Absolutely.
Writing a book, creating a story or argument, what I would call nonfiction argument, to share with somebody, the writer has to go through the same steps, that you can't escape those steps. And they, even with the advent of AI now, you can't escape those steps. The creative process is what it is, but we each go through those steps in different ways. And so that reality has been what has colored my work the whole time. So what I mean by that is I have learned that I can build a structure that I'm confident any writer can benefit from and can go through and get to where they need to go and get to the goal of what they want to accomplish, not marketplace success, but creatively. And so the learning is in refining that. I think of it as a container. There's this space that I hold for a writer to come in and do that work. So the thing that I have learned over time is, what is the quality or shape of that container? And by that, I mean, let's just take the very basic idea of a pantser versus a plotter. So for those who aren't familiar with those terms, somebody who's a plotter loves to do, a comprehensive, rigorous beat by beat outline so that they know exactly what they're writing and there's no stone unturned, and they've got that all sorted. And a pantser is somebody who's just is going to wing it. They're not going to do that planning. They're not going to be that formal. They're just going to write and get there by writing. And for the longest time in the beginning, I would make way for the pantsers. I would, sort of allow them the space to do what they wanted to do and write, and I would sort of work around them. And over the years, I have come to see that I won't work with somebody that way anymore. I believe that you must answer the questions. I don't love a giant, rigorous outline. I'm not a fan of them at all. But I believe that you must separate the act of writing from the act of analysis and design, that they're two separate things. And writers tend to glom them together, and that's where we tend to get in trouble. So we tend to do the work of, what am I going to write? What is my story? What is my point? What is my character's message carrying in the story? All of those story questions. And also the questions I spoke about before. Why am I writing? Where do I want this book to fit in the marketplace? a writer must answer all those questions. There is no escaping it. And that's why I say, even in the age of AI, you have to know what to ask. You have to know the answer to those questions. You have to have those pinned down. And most people try to answer them while they write. They try to answer them through the development of the work itself. And I have come to see that they're two very different processes, and it's incredibly inefficient to try to do them at the same time, which is what pantsing is. So something I have learned and changed and tweaked over the years is my system, my method, my philosophy, my belief is, let's answer these questions first before you start to write. And if you don't want to do that, I can't help you.
I think the methodology behind that makes a lot of sense. It almost sounds like laying the groundwork in terms of a business plan for someone who is wanting to pursue a business, and writing very much for a lot of people is where they hope to take their career when they start writing. And so I think viewing it from that perspective of, you know, who is this book for? Where is it going to fit in the marketplace? Really allows for somebody to deconstruct that process in their head and then determine from there, okay, this is what I need to be considering as I'm writing as well. I think a children's book is a really great example for kind of that easy reference point where we think about, okay, we're writing a children's book, and immediately the association is the children's book is for children, but the children aren't the ones making purchasing decisions in the household. So
Right.
even though the book is for children, the audience that we're trying to reach are the parents and the educators and the teachers and the libraries.
Absolutely. And to think about your reader as a consumer, you know, why do they want this book? As a reader, we go to books for so many different reasons. We go to be educated. We go for entertainment. We go for escape. You know, we go to connect with people who are like us, or to learn about people who are not like us, to learn about being human. There's so many different reasons that we go to a book, or that we love a book, or we engage with a book. And taking the time as a writer to understand, what might I be making that somebody needs, and who is that somebody, and where are they going to encounter this work? What are they going to take away? What we're talking about is really stepping over a line as a writer to wanting to be published. And I think a lot of writers are very fuzzy about that line.
Right.
They make decisions to protect themselves. So from stepping over that line, you know, well, I'm just working on my first book. Well, I'm just going to sort of try this. Well, I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens. I'm not going to invest a lot of time, effort, energy, or money, because then if it doesn't work, I don't have to suffer the rejection or face the reality that I couldn't pull it off. So they sort of do a half-baked job of a lot of things, and they never really step over that line and say, I would like to be published, which is to say, I would like to be read. I would like readers to pay me for this work. And
Right.
these questions that I'm talking about, this question of who is it for, and where is it going to sit on the shelf, and where are they going to encounter it, are as much for the writer as they are for that ultimate reader. It's helping that writer to get into the mindset of, I am making a product. I am making a thing I am going to put a price on and put into the marketplace and sell. And it's doing that with more intention and owning what it is that you want from it. You know, a self-publishing writer, there's so many paths to take through that, and your reasons for wanting to do it need to be really clear, because that's going to inform what path you take and why you're making certain decisions that you are, and what your metric of success is going to be. And if you're not intentional about those decisions, it's not going to turn out well.
Right.
Most people don't stumble onto the exact success that they wish for.
What role does a book coach play play in the accountability aspect of writing, as well as maybe navigating some of those personal blocks that writers often seem to find themselves having, whether that is something like imposter syndrome, it is something like a fear of rejection. How does the role of a book coach support authors through that?
Well, I would say that that is the primary work of a book coach. We all know what a developmental editor does, and what a developmental editor does is amazing. They come in with a finished manuscript and help to make that manuscript the best it can be. So they're working with something that already is there, it exists, it's whole, and they're usually coming in at one point and working on that in that one moment. And a book coach, on the other hand, is working with the writer over time. So I like to say that we're working as much with the writer as we are with the writing. We're helping with all the questions of structure and craft, and if it's fiction, plot, all the things that you would want an editor to do. But along the way, we're working with the writer, their intention, their doubt, their fear, their belief that they shouldn't do this, that they shouldn't say this, that they shouldn't spend their time on this. There's so many emotions in the writing process, and a book coach is that container I talked about, that holding space. That's what's happening in that space, is the writer is becoming the kind of person who is confident and ready to put their work into the world and to stand by their work and to be confident that they've done the best job that they can do and that they've chosen the path that is most aligned with their philosophy and what they want for themselves. So all of those questions are ones that we're engaging with in that container that we've made to help the writer. So that is, you've described the primary work of a book coach.
I think having the support and the guidance is such an important part of the process from an author or a writer at the bare bones of it all, is who's navigating a world that might be unfamiliar or might be something that they have explored previously through self-publishing, and now we're looking to maybe pivot or reignite their sales with a revised manuscript. Do you often have people who have that experience already and then realize maybe there is benefit to book coaching, come back and rework existing projects?
Yes, I think a lot of writers come to book coaches after they've suffered some rejection of some kind, or things have not gone the way that they wanted them to, when they realize that they might need to build more skill, or they might need more support, or the road is lonelier than they thought. Book coaching tends not to be something that people come to right from the beginning until they've experienced it. Then, like, the more seasoned writers that we work with won't write without a book coach. They understand the power of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a change happening, which is that more and more writers are admitting to using book coaches. The New York Times bestselling writer Carolyn Levitt, she's very prolific. I think she's written maybe 12 books, novels, and she wrote a piece in Writer's Digest about, she called it the dirty secret that so many of her colleagues and friends were using. She called it outside editorial help, meaning outside of her publisher and her agent. And she herself in that article talked about the fact that she uses 3 different editors / book coaches at different stages for different reasons. This is all besides her agent and editor at the publishing house. And when I say there's a change, I just see more and more people admitting that it's not a thing you do alone. Writing is a singular activity. You sit by yourself and you write the words that are in your head, but it doesn't end there for most people. Most people have a team or a group all you have to do is open any book and look at the acknowledgments and see the number of people that have helped any given writer. In fact, just the other day, the CEO of Pro Writing Aid, which is one of the software, it's like Grammarly, it's one of the software correction AI engines. They have a big writing community over at Pro Writing Aid, and the CEO, Chris Banks, actually hired one of our book coaches, hired an Author Accelerator book coach. And on LinkedIn, he wrote a post about the power of working with this book coach and how much it has helped him. And this is a guy who's literally making the artificial intelligence that we're all complaining is going to take over for us. And he is saying, no, it's this human guide and these questions. They're going through the method of inquiry that I developed called the blueprint process. He says that this method and these questions, this is what's going to help me write the book I want to write. And it was such a moment to see that admission, like it would be easy for a guy like that to say, I used my software, and no doubt he will, but I am seeing more and more an acceptance of the truth that it's very, very hard to write. Writing a book is an incredibly complex intellectual, creative, and emotional undertaking. And the thought that a person can just figure it out on their own and make it all work, we think that we can because we see some people doing it. We see those, what I call native genius writers, who, or the myths that you hear about, whatever person sat in the coffee shop and wrote their story and, made a 6-figure deal. Those things happen for sure. But that's like the 0.01%. Right. The vast majority of writers are having to learn how to do it, figure out how to do it, get help doing it, have another outside perspective helping them see what they're writing and see how it's landing and see what that experience of the reader is going to be like. And so it's this admission of understanding that we're not, most of us, the 0.01%.
Where do you think the secrecy around utilizing book coaching began, or what influenced some of the stigma or possibly a feeling of inadequacy, if there is that need to lean into utilizing a book coach?
Well, if you think about some of the other art forms, such as putting on a musical or a play, or mounting a art show in a gallery, there's often an assumption of collaboration. I think the myth we all like to imagine is that one person alone sitting in their garret can spin a work of art that could capture the imagination of the whole world. I think it's kind of just a really powerful and beautiful idea that one person can do this. And the work of a novel is the work of that one person's imagination. So it's easy to think that they do it alone. You and I are talking just after the Oscars happened, and I'm always struck by the people that win the awards, and they get up and they thank so many people, and there's the crew, and there's the costume, and there's the makeup, and there's the musician, and we often hear stories of actors who are so sad when the making of the movie is over, because they've come together as this core group of people in this sort of family, and then they dissipate. And that's not what the experience of a writer is. The experience of a writer is you're sitting alone in your chair, wondering if you're doing a good job, wondering if anybody's going to care. There was a clip that they showed at the Oscars presentation. It must have been stunt or special effects or something, but they were showing a woman in a red ball gown and high heels busting through this plate glass window again and again and again and again, and the director calling, "We got to do it again." And you saw the camera people and the crew and the people picking up the glass each time, and they're getting instant feedback on, is this what we want? Is this capturing the thing. But the act of writing is so solitary, and it's always going to be. It's like the J.K. Rowling story. I mean, there's political things around her now, so that's one thing. But that story that she was a single mom and she wrote in the cafe and she wrote on the train, and nobody wanted her story, and then somebody wanted her story, and then it became the franchise of a generation, selling gazillions of copies and making her, so much money. That's the myth we all love. And we don't think about the writer who needs more support or needs to learn how to do what she did, or who needs to write it 15 times before they get it right. We don't like to think about those realities. We like to think that we're all going to be that person. That's the very, very tiny percentage of people who can do that, who accomplish what they want to accomplish with seemingly no help.
Right.
The truth is, most of us need help.
Absolutely. And I do think that with the conversation and some of these pieces about the dirty secret of utilizing a book coach coming to the forefront, that we will ideally start to see more people acknowledging that writing is maybe an experience that is solitary and can be isolating, but that it doesn't need to be that way, and that seeking support and guidance through that journey isn't just okay, it's accepted and it's encouraged. And I just think that the shift in that conversation within the industry is really important.
It is. And, we're also talking about the idea of a writer investing in their writing before they have evidence that it's going to work. And that goes to the idea we were talking about before of considering yourself as an entrepreneur who's making a product. And if you think about any business person, you don't get to bring something to market and spend no time, effort, energy, and money on it.
Right.
Writers tend to think all I have to spend is my time and my energy. They don't think they need to invest in that product. And I think that is a fundamental mistake, that the person who wants to impact readers and have readers pay attention and pay money needs to think about the experience that they're giving to that reader and invest in making sure that what they've made is ready. The fact of the matter is that with the democratization of publishing, meaning that there are gatekeepers in some realms still, but anybody can now publish anything at any time. The doors are completely open to anybody writing something and publishing it. But unfortunately, along with that access has come just a giant flood of awful books.
Right. And the saturation of a very heavily monitored industry previously is now an influx of books that maybe aren't of the best quality.
Yeah. And there's a reason that that readers get frustrated, and that different forms of gatekeeping are still exist or still happen. It's a tricky world out there, and I always say you don't want to put out a book that you're not proud of and that you can't really stand behind for a long time.
Right.
Even if your plan is to write a series and to write a bunch of books and to have them come out one after each other in order to game the algorithm and make money, like that's a path that can happen for sure, but you've got to pay attention to the quality of the book. For some years, I participated in a thing that they would do over at Mark Dawson's self-publishing formula. They have a huge number of writers in their audience, and we used to do a thing where I was the editorial eye, and there would be a cover designer, and I think a copywriter looking at the jacket copy, and then me, and my job was to look at the 30 pages. So this was, somebody would submit their work on Amazon, and we would just go look at what was on Amazon. So what does the cover look like? What does the jacket copy or the words look like? And what are those opening pages that readers can get for free? How are they landing? And the people were submitting their work to answer the question, why is my book not selling? And it was baffling to me because every single time it was so obvious. Like there were really egregious things in the writing right in the opening pages, usually page 1, always by page 5. But for sure, you could read up to maybe 30 pages on Amazon for free. It would just be so many things wrong. And this is not subjective. This is not,
Right.
Does Jennie like this? Or, would I read it? Does it hit me? That's not what we're talking about. There are objective things that must be present in a piece of writing that were not present there, or that the person hadn't bothered with, or what have you, and then they're frustrated about, why is my book not selling? And it's like, because it's, readers are smart. They're used to high quality, and they, at the end of the day, they want high quality. That was a really eye-opening experience.
You have worked with writers who have had major book deals and have reached bestseller status. What do you believe are some of those key elements or skills or maybe qualities, characteristics that do separate some of these authors who see success from those who do struggle? Maybe like some of the works that you mentioned being involved on Amazon through that critique process.
I think there's one thing.
Perfect.
That separates the people who meet with big success out from those who don't. And that is the willingness to look at their work from that objective standpoint. So that means the willingness to take feedback, the willingness to look at something and say, it's not working, it's not what I wanted, it's not landing, I'm going to write it again. That ability throughout the coaching process, throughout the editing process. I was interviewing for my podcast, which is the #AmWriting podcast, the writer Allison Hammer and Allie Brady, who are a writing team. Together they write as Allie Brady, and they were talking about their book. They're published by one of the big 5 publishers on this book, and 30 days before this book was going into production, their editor urged them to change the genre of the story.
30 days before
30
production.
And I think it was a decision, if I remember correctly, that came from the sales team. This was maybe their 3rd book together. So there were reasons that it wasn't just like willy-nilly or, hey, let's torture these writers. It was like, we're really thinking this is going to make a very big difference. Are you guys willing to do this? What do you think? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And so 30 days to change the genre of this book. And they were talking about their experience of doing that. And to me, that's what I'm talking about. The willingness to look at that objectively and say, there are reasons this makes sense. There are reasons that we're going to do this, and we can do it. We have the energy, the skill, the capacity to figure it out. And they figured it out. So it's that willingness, that openness, that coachability that you see at every stage of the writers who are doing it. That's the thing. You can talk about things like persistence, super important, but persistence without that ability isn't going to get you anything. You're just going to be hammering away at the same thing, not being open to how it could be better. You could talk about pure skill as a writer who perhaps has the ability to write beautiful sentences or craft incredible metaphors, or however you want to describe that beautiful writing. But again, beautiful writing in the absence of self-reflection and the ability to consider how the whole thing is landing, you just get pretty writing. That's not enough. All of the things that you have to learn to self-publish, learning the business of self-publishing, if you will, super important skills, how to advertise your book on Amazon or get that bestseller flag on your opening day, or how you price your books, like all of those questions and decisions and all those things. None of that's going to matter if you haven't written a book that does what it needs to do, and if you haven't taken the time to go through that discernment process. So to me, that's just it. It's that ability to look at the work, to change the work, to consider the work, to step outside of your own self and look at it from a different perspective. That, to me, that's it. There's also, it must be said, luck and timing play a massive role. But over the course of a career, you're not going to be there to enjoy luck and timing if you don't do this other thing that I've been talking about, right? If you don't, let's just say you write a book and you put it out there and nothing happens. It doesn't find an audience. It doesn't land. What's going to get you to the next book and to the next book that might hit better is this sense of, okay, what did I do well? What did I not do? Why didn't it sell? What didn't work? What could I do differently? Is there something I should change? Is it a question of just going back in and trying again? Or is it a question of how I did it or what I did? It's that ability that's going to get you to write the next book, that's going to get you in a place where you can, enjoy the luck and timings. That's where I land.
Outside of the writing and working with a book coach, and whether it's having the natural skill or being receptive to feedback and implementing that, what would you suggest is a way for authors to build their author brand or engage with an audience and start to maybe test the waters from that perspective? Because I think when we are talking about self-published authors in particular, a lot of that falls on the author. We always joke that once your book is published, that's of course not where things end. You still are now at this point having to talk about your book, having to engage those audiences. If you're not talking about your book, chances are nobody else is talking about your book. So what are some things that authors can do behind the scenes during the writing process that might help to set them up for success?
Well, I believe that they should start the work of engaging with their reader at the same time that they start writing, if not before. It's not, don't wait until the book is done. It's the work of a writer, connecting with your reader. So it's figuring out where your reader is gathering, what else they're consuming. It's finding a way to speak to them and connect with them and have conversation with them and be relevant to them. And that could be, for quite a while, you as a participant in somebody else's universe. So it could be being a good literary citizen and talking about other writers you love, or following their newsletter, or going to their events, being present for them. Right. That's huge. A huge thing that you want to do is be engaged with the writing universe. You could imagine this scenario. Let's say that you live in a small town and there's a bookstore that often hosts local writers and maybe also not local writers, and they're having events and they're trying to stay afloat, and they're constantly engaging with people who like to read. And let's say you never go to anything. You never go to any event. You never go buy a book at that bookstore. You don't engage with it at all. And then your book comes out and you approach them and you say, I want to do an event. How's that going to land? Versus you're a person who, 8 times a year goes to that bookstore to an event, and you go to the writer gatherings and you ask questions and you buy the writers' books and you thank the bookstore owners and you talk to them about how that event went, and you maybe offer to help or volunteer or whatever your level of engagement is, and then you write a book and you go to them and you say, I want to do a thing, it should be obvious to us, but it's not. But the same principle holds online. The thing that I think is the cringiest of all things is when a writer has a book come out and then suddenly all their social media, everything, all their posts, all their emails is like, I wrote a book, buy my book, look at my book, yay me, come on everybody, review me on Amazon. So it's just like there's this desperate sort of screechy plea, and
Yes.
it doesn't work, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's the same thing I was just describing about that bookstore. That's the person who never went to anything showing up online and saying, hey, everybody, help me. Well, did you help anybody else? Did you show up to anything else? Did you engage with those readers who were, reading other books? Do you know who they are and what they're doing? And so it's finding the ways and the places to be in community and in connection, so that when your book comes out, it's more of an invitation to be part of what you're doing rather than
Absolutely. I have referenced this in a couple of episodes, but I published a children's book 2 years ago about my daughter's journey with cranial helmeting. She was less than a year old, went through the process of birth trauma that resulted in her requiring physiotherapy and eventually needing a helmet for 5.5 months. And through that process, I was hopping online, asking people if they had questions about our process or experience, asking people if this was content that they even cared about or wanted to see from me. And everybody became so supportive and engaged and invested in our journey that when the time came that I was going through the process of picking our book cover or where we were going to host a book launch party, that was all included in my stories, and I was including polls and preliminary illustrations. And by the time the book was available for purchase, people were so invested because they had contributed to the project that they felt compelled to support it. They had been there kind of from the grassroots. There's such a misconception that you have to wait until you have the finished product to say, this is what I've been working on, when you can really start that, as you mentioned, the day that you start writing.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's a perfect example. And, some people are like, I wish I could just write and I would be discovered and swept up and given a bunch of money and not have to deal with any of that. I mean, I would just say that's never going to happen. It's just never going to happen. So don't be sitting and waiting for that. If you don't want to do the work of engaging with readers and figuring out the marketing piece and being part of the whatever universe you're trying to enter into, I would say don't bother.
Yeah.
Don't bother writing a book.
Absolutely. Now, from the perspective of future trends in writing, in publishing, we talked a little bit about, now that people are more comfortable talking about having used book coaches, what do you see as being kind of the next steps in book coaching and within the industry of publishing, whether that is inclusive of AI and how that all contributes to the landscape as it's currently known as?
I mean, I don't know. It's wild out there. I think we're just really continuing to be in a time of massive change in our industry. I don't think the time of change is over. So there's so much shifting. There's so many new technologies. There's so many new, I spent yesterday, I don't know how long, sending cease and desist letters to people trying to steal my content. Like it's just part of being in the world right now. I know 2 writers who have gone through a year-long process of trademarking their name because people were stealing their name to sell books. And, it's just sort of wild out there. So who knows what's going to happen? There's a lot of book banning happening. Like there's just a lot out there. So to me, the thing that I focus on and that I think a writer should focus on is the power of being a creator. What does it mean to you to be a creator? And to look at the process of being a creator and enter into that process. And there's so much power in it. There's so much pleasure in it. There's so much learning in it, in doing the work. And so finding the pleasure and the motivation to do the work. And I think if you focus on that, everything that's happening out here with technology or platform or how we reach readers, or the simple act of, I am a person who writes and the reader is a person who reads.
Right.
That's not going to change. That's never going to change. Will the reader be offered writing and content that is not produced by a human? Probably. They'll get to choose. They'll get to discern. But they're still the reader reading. The writer is still the writer writing. So focusing on that very basic fact that is never going to change and not letting all of the noise distract from that. And then the reality of what it is to be the creator, and realizing that having support in that, having a team, having a community that can help you do your best work and be the best creator you can be, to me, that's where the focus has to lie.
We have one more segment here that we like to do on our podcast. It is a user-generated question. So for those listening, if you aren't currently, please give us a follow at Tellwell Publishing. This question came from one of our audience members. In your experience, what are the most common mistakes writers make when working on their manuscripts, and how do you help them avoid or correct them? So I know we chatted a little bit about not being willing to receive criticism or to self-reflect and implement those changes. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yes. So I'll answer this question in a very craft-based, tactical way, because we did talk a lot about the writer's mindset and intention and emotion. The biggest mistake that I see in any manuscript that lands in my lap, and over the years have been a lot, is lack of attention to structure. So structure, in my mind, is the great missing thing of so many books. And what do I mean by that? I mean, in fiction, not being clear on who the narrator is and where they stand in time. If there's multiple narrators, not being clear on why or what role each of them play, or multiple timelines, even the flow of the story or the material, where it begins and ends, just those structural things. And the same is true with memoir, the same is true with nonfiction, just the work of shaping the content. So there's craft, which I think of as almost a page by page. How do you write a scene? How do you write a line? How do you write dialogue? How do you write nonfiction? How do you, present an interview or a story well? How do you present research well? How do you balance those things out? Like, those questions of craft are mostly what people focus on in any sort of writing workshop or conference or anything. But structure is taking a step back and looking at the whole of it. And to me, that's the mistake. And the question that the listener asked was how to fix it. Well, I have a tool that's called the Blueprint. You can find it at jennienash.com/blueprint. There are some free tools and resources around it there, but there is a tool for fiction, nonfiction, and memoir. There's a different blueprint, and the tool is a very specific kind of outline. It's a 3-page, no more than 3-page outline. There's very specific rules for it, and you can use it to measure this and to test it and to see if your structure is holding and see where it's fallen apart. It's a really great, powerful, flexible tool. It's a way of stepping back and gaining perspective on what you've done from a structural standpoint, so that you can see it, so that you can fix it.
Amazing. This has been such a valuable conversation. You are undoubtedly such a leader within the book coaching industry, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to have this conversation. I know it will bring so much value to our audience and our listeners. So for those listening, where can anyone following along find?
Well, thanks for having me. Folks can find the blueprint at jennienash.com/blueprint. If they're interested in working with an Author Accelerator certified book coach, they can go to authoraccelerator.com/match me. That's match me. And we have coaches working in all different genres, offering services at all different price points. And you can search our directory there for somebody who might be a good fit. And then finally, if somebody is thinking, well, I want to be a book coach, I have a free training that they can watch at bookcoaches.com/coaches.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Jennie. And for those listening, be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, or check out this full video on YouTube. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.